You have stood at a funeral before, or you will. Someone brings flowers. Nobody questions it. It feels natural, almost automatic, like breathing. But somewhere, 70,000 years ago, in a cave in the mountains of northern Iraq, someone else did the exact same thing over a body that was not even fully human the way you are. And that single act may be one of the strangest clues we have about when compassion first began. The place is called Shanidar Cave. In the 1950s and 1960s, archaeologist Ralph Solecki led excavations there and uncovered the remains of several Neanderthals, individuals who lived and died long before modern humans ever reached that part of the world. One skeleton in particular, later nicknamed Shanidar IV, was found curled in a shallow grave. Around and beneath the body soil samples contained an unusually high concentration of pollen. And not from just any plants. Researchers identified pollen from yarrow, cornflower, hollyhock, and other flowering species, many of which are known in later human history for medicinal use. Solecki's conclusion was bold. He proposed that this Neanderthal had been deliberately buried on a bed of flowers, laid there by grieving companions who wanted to send the dead into whatever came next with beauty, not just dirt. The press loved it. Newspapers ran headlines about the flower burial, and for decades, Shanidar IV became a symbol of something people desperately wanted to believe, that even Neanderthals, so often portrayed as brutish and simple, were capable of grief, of ritual, of love. Here's where the story gets more complicated and more honest. Was it really an intentional burial, or is there a simpler explanation hiding underneath? Not everyone accepted Solecki's interpretation. In the 1980s, archaeologist Jeffrey Sommer re-examined the pollen data and proposed an alternative explanation that had nothing to do with mourning rituals at all. Sommer pointed to a small burrowing rodent called the Persian jurd, a creature known to collect seeds and flowers and store them underground in stockpiles, sometimes directly inside cave sediments. If jurds had been active in the cave both before and after the Neanderthal's death, their burrowing could have introduced the pollen entirely by accident, mixing ancient flower material into the grave without any human ever placing a single stem there. This is the part that should make you sit with some discomfort. For years, the flower burial was treated almost like proof, a clean, emotionally satisfying answer to a very old question, but real evidence rarely arrives clean. It arrives tangled, and separating truth from wishful thinking takes patience most people are not willing to give it. So which is it? Did grieving Neanderthals decorate a body with flowers? Or did a burrowing rodent accidentally leave a false trail 70,000 years long? The honest answer is that archaeologists still argue about it. Some researchers have pushed back against Sommer's rodent explanation, noting that jurd burrows tend to leave physically distinct clusters of seeds, rather than the dispersed pollen pattern found at Shanidar, and that the flowering species identified do show up in tight, non-random clumps consistent with placed stems, rather than scattered storage. Others remain unconvinced either way. The uncertainty itself is the lesson. Ancient behavior is rarely handed to us with a label attached. But step back from the pollen debate for a moment, because Shanidar Cave holds something else, something far less disputed. The Neanderthals buried there were not simply left where they fell. Several individuals show clear signs of intentional positioning, bodies placed on their sides, limbs arranged, sometimes in shallow pits that appear to have been dug rather than found. One individual, Shanidar I, lived for years with a withered arm, partial blindness, and severe hearing loss, injuries that would have made him nearly useless as a hunter. And yet he survived into middle age. Decades passed, what his body alone could have managed. Someone fed him, someone protected him. Care, not just burial, may be the real discovery hiding inside that cave. Doesn't that change the question entirely? Maybe it was never really about the flowers. Because here's what almost nobody disagrees on. Burial itself, the act of deliberately placing a body in the ground rather than leaving it exposed, is not a universal animal behavior. Most species leave their dead where they fall. Elephants are sometimes seen lingering near a dead herd member, touching the bones with their trunks, but they do not dig graves. Chimpanzees have been observed grooming a deceased companion's body before eventually moving on, but intentional, repeated burial, treating a specific body in a specific way because of what that individual meant to the group, appears to be something closer to uniquely human, and possibly something Neanderthals were doing too. Anthropologist Paul Pettitt, who has spent much of his career studying the origins of mortuary behavior, has argued that deliberate burial marks a genuine cognitive threshold. It requires the ability to hold a concept of this individual mattered, separate from the immediate practical concerns of hunger, safety, or disease. It requires planning. Digging a pit takes effort a grieving group could have spent on almost anything else. Choosing to spend it on the dead, rather than the living, is not something biology strictly requires. It is something a mind chooses. Think about what that means, sitting with it honestly. Somewhere in the deep past, before language as you know it, before art, before agriculture, a creature not entirely like you looked at the body of someone it had lost and decided that leaving it exposed to scavengers was not acceptable. Whether or not flowers were part of that decision, the decision itself was already extraordinary. And this is the part that should genuinely unsettle you, in a good way. Grief, real grief, tied to memory and loss, and the specific absence of one particular individual may not be a purely human invention at all. It may be older than your species. It may have existed in minds that went extinct roughly 40,000 years ago, minds that shared this planet with your own ancestors for tens of thousands of years, before disappearing. So the next time you stand at a funeral and someone brings flowers, and it feels automatic, almost too natural to question, remember that the instinct might be genuinely ancient, not a modern custom dressed up as tradition, but something closer to an echo, a behavior passed down, reinvented, or perhaps independently discovered by more than one kind of human that has ever walked this earth. You have stood at a funeral before, or you will, and whether Shanidar IV really was laid to rest on a bed of wildflowers or not, one thing from that cave remains undisturbed by 70,000 years of debate. Someone, something, once looked at death and refused to simply walk away from it.